It's beaten Northwestern week, and the key may be getting off the field on third down.
You are Locked On Huskers, your daily podcast on the Nebraska Cornhuskers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey gang, DP here, Locked On Huskers. Thank you for making Locked On Huskers your first watch and listen each and every single day. Greatly appreciate you doing what you do and coming and hang out with us. Mark Onweiler, if you would, please let them know about Jase Medical.
Thank you, DP. This episode of Locked On Huskers is brought to you by Jase Medical. In today's world, there's a lot of uncertainty, and it's important for all of us to be prepared. Whether it's political unrest, fires, hurricanes, earthquakes, tornadoes, all these things can lead to supply chain shortages for medications and the inability to get medications in a timely manner. The solution? The Jase Case. The Jase Case is a personalized emergency medication kit that contains 5 essential antibiotics that treat the most common and deadly bacterial infections. You can also customize your case and add additional life-saving medications based on your unique needs. Just choose the medications that best fit you and your family's unique circumstances. Jase is continually working to expand their medication offerings. In those recent efforts, they added ivermectin as an option in the Jase Case. Plus, you can get gift cards. Buy a gift card for your family or your loved ones so that they can get a Jase Case of their own. Go to jasemedical.com and enter the code LOCKEDON at checkout for a $20 discount on your order. That's promo code LOCKEDON at jasemedical.com to get your own life-saving Jase Case. DP, back to you.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it. What we're going to do today is we're going to compare the offenses. And as you compare them over the course, whether it's numbers, sequence, tendencies, those things, and then the actual numbers that are in play, there's some things that jump out to you. And one of those things that stood out to me is third down. So when you compare the two offenses, and that's what I want to do in today's show, I want to talk about what they do in the pass game, what they do in the run game, and then what the coaching tendencies are and some of the keys that they tend to lean on. But there's a different approach to how they get to third down and what they're willing to do in those situations. Some of that plays out in the red zone. Some of that plays out on fourth down. But both of these teams have tendencies when it comes to how they try to put points on the board. If you compare the teams, there's some slight differences in production, the caliber of opponent. You can look at the common teams, the teams that both teams have played, and then look at situations and scenarios. And what I want to start with is the offense overall. That when you look at Nebraska's offense, and some of the numbers stunned me a little bit because in total production, if you compare both teams, right, if you put them side by side, that what Nebraska's doing is generating 1,400 yards in 250 plays. All right, the average, and you bounce around losses and tackles for loss and sacks and those sort of things, and then net yardage gets into play. Nebraska's net yardage per play is 5.7 yards per play, per offensive play. For Northwestern, that number sits at 4.6 yards per offensive play. But here's the weird part. Smaller average, more touchdowns. And their approach is that in averaging 4.1 yards a carry, that they feel like they're consistent, but they're getting bigger chunks in the passing game on third down. More importantly, they're getting bigger chunks of yardage on second down. And that's where the thing plays out. That Nebraska's defense, the amount of plays it's been on the field versus Northwestern's, we'll talk about that tomorrow. But from an offensive standpoint, finding out that Northwestern's commitment to who it is that they are and their identity and their character, in that they play in a controlled space and just try to control that space. They've got a couple of big plays. They've got an 80-yard touchdown pass, and then one big run, some intermediate 40-yard throws. But the bulk of their offense is in that box between the numbers and in front of the safeties. And that speaks to tendency and culture, that you make fewer mistakes, You come up with fewer empty plays. You have more production in the plays that you do run. And that it affects you, and it should affect you late in games. Now, it didn't work that way for Northwestern against Howard in their last outing. But offensively, what they will try to do, and again, they try to be balanced, but they're a better pass team than they are a run team. They're also a better pass team than Nebraska is currently, just based on the numbers, that you can produce 54 first downs in the passing game for Northwestern to 25 for Nebraska. And the average in those catches in those plays, these are minus 10-yard throws. So it was very consistent. One, in the throws that they're asking the quarterback to make. Two, the routes that they're trying to be dominant and they're just flooding zones and trying to be active. Go to green, throw to green is kind of the process that they work from. And it's it's not scary. As Jay Foreman likes to say, it's death by 1,000 paper cuts. And then are you willing to withstand it to get what it is you want? And then when you compare the running games, that Nebraska has 47 running first downs achieved by running the ball. Northwestern is 44. So it's not like they can't run the ball. I just think the big plays and how the quarterbacks excel in this thing will be a big thing to circle, because that's how your Nebraska is going to control this game. Time of possession also matters, and the run game has direct correlation to it. But as I've said in previous episodes, Nebraska is an 11-man offense, and that plus one that teams normally don't defend is an offensive factor for Nebraska. Harburg is a factor with the ball in his hands. And if you don't normally defend the quarterback in that space, then you have to adjust. Well, they're going to have to adjust. Northwestern is going to have to make an adjustment on who's going to be accountable for them, how often you switch that up, what situations is that going to happen, and then the question is, do they alternate who the spy is on Harburg on first and second down? Because it's much more easily identified in third down, especially when it's third and long or third and longer. Third and short, that spy thing doesn't really help you because it's all heads to bed. You're just trying to get bodies to bodies. But in those longer 3rd and 5 and 6 and 7 and 8, then you can identify a little bit more. And both teams do a really good job of hiding the spy, not letting the offense know. Well, both of the one quarterback in the game has the ability to take a base level play and turn it into a touchdown. And I'll say it. While a week ago, Northwestern had a quarterback run where things broke down defensively for Howard, and he took it to the house and banged his head on the goalpost. I don't think that's the norm or the common thread. Now you've seen it, so you have to fear it and you have to prepare for it. But I think Harburg's better with the ball. I think Northwestern's better passing the ball. That's just my opinion, and that's what the numbers say. But we'll go through those numbers over the course of this episode, because the running game, that Nebraska has more yards per rush. They also have fewer attempts, so they're getting a bigger return on investment for their run play calls. And that's kind of what the option offense does for you. That's what attacking teams that don't cover the quarterback will do. And Nebraska's found that, well, big plays exist in that space. Northwestern has run the ball 198 times. So let's say 200 times for 800 yards in total offense. But the average, if you add in the losses and tackles for losses and sacks and that sort of thing, they're only averaging 3 yards a carry. But they stay committed to it. Almost 30 more carries on the ground for Northwestern than Nebraska. More committed, foundationally sound in what you do. But the yards without the tackles for loss, when they're just in their run game, they're at 4.1 yards per carry. Nebraska's numbers are a little bit better. We'll throw it a break there. When we come back, we'll get a bit into the passing game, because those numbers will jump out at you as well. And also tell you, how the guys up front are going to deal with all of this, because I still think the game will be determined up front. I'm DP. This is Locked On Huskers. Thank you, gang. Welcome back to Locked On Huskers. Mark Onweiler, if you would please, let them know about eBay Motors.
Thank you, DP. This episode of Locked On Huskers is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply, eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. DP, back to you.
Thank you, sir. Greatly appreciate it. Again, in this episode of Locked On Huskers, I wanted to focus on the offenses and kind of compare them apples to apples, just in numbers. The schemes are their own podcast and own shows. And a lot of that has to do with who's available, who's going to play, who's not going to play. But with Harburg as the starter, new receiver, and Malachi Coleman for the Huskers, some additional work for some freshmen who are going to get opportunities, and then more production may be required of Bullock and Kemp. But the unknown factors for both of these teams, the ones that break your back because you're defending and you're leaning against. Two things. One, tight ends. The tight ends that have the best day offensively will lead their team to victory, because it's the greatest way to have the most production without the high risk. And that's a big part of what the game plan and scheming is to figure out how does Nebraska, in a space where it's throwing the ball less than Northwestern does, it's getting fewer plays than Northwestern does. That's a number that jumped out at me as well, that, the number of plays is crazy. But Northwestern's figured out how to get touchdowns out of their drives, and Nebraska has 12 TDs to Northwestern 17. That's a bit mind-boggling to me. But Nebraska offensively, when they throw the ball, again, the quarterbacks are 44 for 83, 6 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. The bulk of that interception work happened under the Sims watch. Harburg has been pretty good about taking care of the ball. But at some point in the Big Ten, especially against a defensive-first team like Northwestern, you're going to have to figure out how to move the ball via the air, because they would just throw numbers at you up front and force you to beat them. But the numbers for Northwestern were slightly surprising: 122 of 201. They're averaging 200 yards passing a game to Nebraska's 125. That's slightly surprising to me. They're both averaging around 6 yards per completion. So then it becomes a matter of when you're calling things and what are you doing in the red zone? What are you doing on third and short, third and intermediate? And that is where Northwestern's play calling shows up, because they've been smart with the ball. Fewer turnovers, fewer penalties in that space. And then being more productive when they get an opportunity to get points in the red zone, having a field goal kicker that's making kicks. Relying on the defense just to say that, quite frankly, we're going to keep you in it. All you have to do is not beat yourself. They're not doing much exceptionally. They run wide receiver screens and running back screens, easy throws for quarterbacks. They try to get the tight end in the short windows in between the hash marks, because that's easy throw. If they get them outside, they'll take the risk, but you could count 4 times in 3 games, in the last 3 games that I watched in full, where they would use the tight ends in that space. It is using the tight end in the slot to get down here towards the sideline and make a key block for the wide receiver screen. Both teams are going to need their tight ends to be productive. I'm not sure that the wide receiver play is where you can expect to win the game. Now, the young guys can step up. Malachi can step up. And again, a great day for Malachi is if he gets up and he gets 150-50 ball and does something with it for plus yards, that's a win. Like Nebraska fans, we've seen him in high school. We've watched what he can do in that space. We know that he's capable, and I'm just going to repeat it, that his body has matured and changed over the course of the last few months. He's starting to look like a Division I elite wide receiver. That four-star look is a legitimate thing. Now he needs to produce. And what you ask him to do versus what the easiest thing to do, how they use Malachi Coleman. Is he there to stretch the defense? Is he there to use that length and that size to get downhill and make blocks? Is he a decoy? Is he somebody that can just draw a linebacker, safety, corner out of the play and allow Harburg to do work? All of those things are true, and all of those things are possible. But you're going to need production from the young guys in the receiver room, and take some note from Northwestern on how they keep their team on the field on third down. Smart play calling, short throws in short space, identifying down and distance, and being purposeful in the play call, not falling in love with the idea of a play rather than the execution of the play. Marcus Satterfield has his hands full. But from all accounts of practice, there seemed to be some feeling that they're starting to mesh in that space. The other thing will be line play, offensive line play. But we'll get into that. Northwestern and their receivers. Now, if you're talking about having 4 competent receivers, 2 excellent receivers who will give you 4 or 5 catches a game, they're all going to be between 10 and 15 yards a catch. They can get stretched vertical, but I like Nebraska's matchup there. So, but they certainly can break a tackle and get vertical. Not the likeliest of things, but certainly possible because we've seen it on tape. What really comes into play when you talk about these two offenses, in the red zone, they're really, really good. Nebraska should have success in the red zone. Northwestern has been strong. Again, great play calling in the red zone. Getting points off of those drives is vital and important, and missed field goals will play a part of it. The team that actually makes field goals this week, again, at an advantage. I don't know how many points it's going to take for Nebraska to score to win this game against Northwestern. In my mind, that's a 23, 24-point space. If they score 27 points, they should win the game. But that means you also have to hold somebody to that. And while we have faith in Nebraska defense and the new black shirts, this is why we show up on Saturday, Memorial Stadium, to find out exactly what version of this Husker team takes the field. Toward the break, when we come back in the final segment, I want to talk about both offensive lines and what they like to do well. And then the red zone numbers will point to field goals. 6 points is greater than 3 points. I'm DP. Locked on Huskers. We'll be right back. Hey, gang, DP, Locked on Huskers. Thank you once again for making – that's how you find me. Making Locked on Huskers your first watch and listen each and every single day. I want to close out with some of the line conversation and then the red zone work in play. Now, a number that jumps out, and the number of play, the differential between the number of plays Northwestern's offense has run and Nebraska's has run, comes into third down execution play calling, and then not putting the ball on the turf. Northwestern does a really good job of taking care of the ball. 1 fumble. And they put it on the turf a couple of times, but they fall on it. And they end drives the right way. They're not ending those drives with a turnover or a fumble. They're ending it with a punt or a field goal or an extra point. That's in an ideal world, and that's what Northwestern is doing with it. That's a thing that Nebraska is going to have to get better at. And the reality is that Northwestern, in all of its drives, in its 6 games, it's been in the red zone 4 times every game. It's an average of 4 per game. I'll say it again. 6 games with a 3-3 record. They are getting into the red zone 24 times. And in those 24 trips, they have scored touchdowns. They've scored in 20 of the 24, and they've scored within the red zone as well. They've scored 12 of 17 for touchdowns. And the others, they got points. They don't do the empty drive thing once they get in your side of the field. And they've got a really good punter who can deaden the ball and pin you back. Nebraska's numbers, their offensive numbers come into play because they've put the ball on the turf 10 times. And that takes away offensive plays. It puts the defense back on the field, puts wear and tear on them. But there is a thing, as I said in the open, that getting off the field on third down is important for both defenses against these two offenses. But one of these offenses has a history of keeping the ball longer. Not as many plays, but longer, which allows time for adjustments, allows time for recovery. Nebraska has an advantage in the time of possession. It's usually a 5-minute differential per game, which is pretty substantial. If that number stays true, that they have time of possession in a big way over Northwestern on Saturday, Memorial Stadium is going to be rocking and rolling. They're going to have a party. Time of possession, no fumbles, no interceptions. Don't turn the ball over. Keep it simple. Those base level Northwestern has fewer penalties than Nebraska offensively. That's also a big deal. And that when Northwestern gets into the red zone, they are trying to get a touchdown. 6 points is greater than 3. So if Nebraska gets in the red zone, we need to figure out a way to put 6s on the board. And here's the thing. In the red zone, Northwestern's not very good at stopping the run. So there are going to be opportunities for Nebraska. The numbers don't lie. The numbers are pretty consistent. But Northwestern's offense averaged 22 points a game. Nebraska's averages at 21.5. It's defensively where there's some difference. And then in the way they score. Nebraska's, normally 3 out of 5 in the red zone. Higher percentage. They need to get touchdowns. If Nebraska's kicking a bunch of field goals, I'll take points on the board. But it's not the easiest way to beat Northwestern because they will stay close and they will rattle. Now, I'll say this. After looking at film today, and feel free to go and look at film and contradict if you want, but I like the two Nebraska lines on offense and defense. I like the way they line up and what they should be able to do against Northwestern. But that's not how this game will be determined. Fans don't get a say-so. It's just those big dudes up front. Tomorrow we'll compare the defenses so we can start to get our eyes locked in on what we're going to see at Memorial Stadium, and then Friday I'll give the preview and a few matchup scenarios to pay attention to and some players to watch. So we've got a busy week all the way up through Saturday's kickoff, and then we'll give you live reports from Memorial Stadium on Locked On Huskers now. So all of that to say thank you for making Locked On Huskers your first watch and listen today. Greatly appreciate you. And we'll close the show with the 3 words that we absolutely love so much. Go Big Red.